Aquillow, Season 6, Chapter 6, The Plan. When was the last time I came to the Aquillow Hospital ER? I think it was a little before I closed the cafe. The coffee machine and I had gotten into one of our regular disagreements, and what would normally have been but a shouting match between us devolved into domestic violence. There's no point in asking who started it, though on average the machine is the more belligerent in our relationship. The bottom line is, a slight scalding of my palm sent me into a rage, and next thing I knew, I'd opened a gash in my hand from trying to slap the damn thing. The doctor didn't even bother with stitches that time, content with using medical glue and tape. My hand looked like a DIY project, but I was assured it would heal fine. This time around, the circumstances are far less comical and the consequences far more dire. The wound being treated required painkillers, x-rays, and bandages. With a little luck, no surgery will be needed, but the road to recovery will be more demanding than preferred. Hands are devious little things, as complex in their function as they are versatile in their use. To shatter a hand as thoroughly as this one has been will demand long hours of physical therapy and regular checkups. And that is the best case scenario. Unnerving as it may be to look at, the wound isn't my only worry. Far in the back of my mind, I have to contend with the damage back at the cafe. And while flesh and bone will mend and heal, there are certain things which broke tonight that could remain beyond repair. You can't go back to her, I explain, breaking the uneasy silence between Gulliver and I. He sits on the side of the examination table, his massive frame sunken upon itself. His shaved head, catching a perfect reflection of the fluorescent ceiling light, hangs between his shoulders as he cradles his broken hand. I can't go home, he whispers, sounding afraid of his own voice. Not sure what they gave me, but I'm not driving like this. Gulliver looks up at me, liquid brown eyes still glistening with tears of rage and pain. There's a weary plea in his irises, as if I could somehow fix some of it. If not the hand, at least our equally shattered friendship. So what? I ask, struggling to keep my outrage in check. You're just gonna crawl back to her after what she did to you? A slight squinting of his eyes is all I need to regret my tone. Broken metacarpals aside, Gulliver is still in a fragile state, and it won't take much to put him on the defensive. But when else will I get to reason with him again? It's not what you think. I saw it with my own eyes, Gulliver. The way the scarf was choking you, forcing you to do her will. And when the nurse cut off your sweater, it was like a chain had been pulled off your limbs. You should have seen the look on your face, like a dog having its collar off for the first time. I'm not letting you go back to that. He shrugs. Naked, monstrous shoulders roll under his coat, as if a shiver has gone through his muscles. With a grunt, Gulliver pulls himself to his feet. He's a wobbly tower, a tall building of uncertain engineering. Drugs, pain, exhaustion, or any combination of the three have made his ankles into jelly. For a second, I fear he might fall over or try to steady himself with his bandaged hand, but somehow he remains upright. Stay at my place, I offer. You'll be safe, and maybe I can bake you something that'll help with the hand. I can tell that he considers it, if only briefly. It's in how he waits a moment before snorting and the way he avoids looking me in the eyes. That'll just make matters worse. Besides, what if it happens again? What if I hit you this time instead of the counter? Images of the event flash through my mind's eye to match his words. Gulliver, as if possessed, towering over me in the cafe. Every hint of his personality stripped from him, leaving only a face contorted with rage in its wake. I'd never seen such fury in a man before. Only the flesh hounds, the wrath demons, could compare. Whatever took over Gulliver, he managed enough willpower to redirect it towards the countertop. His hand, a massive sledgehammer of muscle and bone, cracked over the hard, polished wood. Immovable objects split under the impact of an unstoppable force, but not before taking a toll of its own. The Aquilo does not take being struck lightly. Gulliver's arm bounced back with enough power to send him to the ground, the thunderous blow enough to shock him out of his torpor. From a colossal monster, he was reduced to a weeping boy, balled up around his wounded hand. The pain must have been unbearable, draining much of the color from his face, leaving his skin the color of ash. In spite of his obvious distress, it took a full minute before I could recover enough to offer any help. Seeing him standing tall again, even if on uncertain footing, is enough to make me uneasy. The spell is broken, I try to assure him, but the waver in my voice as I try to step out from under his shadow undermines my point. I'll be fine, Miriam. Ophi and I... He hesitates. Ophelia and I have a lot to talk about. Carefully, Gulliver circumnavigates me, making sure to stay a solid foot away as he makes his way around the small examination room. Everything here looks like it was made 2 or 3 sizes too small for him. He's a child stumbling through a dollhouse, yet he manages to do so without so much as brushing against my coat. At least let me walk you back, I say, following out into the ER's waiting room. If I can't convince you by the time we get there, you can stay at Ophelia's. Or, an unpleasant voice counters from the reception desk, he can walk with me instead of getting badgered for 10 minutes. There she is. Her red coat and matching hat look so out of place under the blue fluorescence and seafoam green walls. Cheeks blushing from the late-night cold give her an air of health that has no place here. The witch, Ophelia, holding her ever-present purse and wearing her perpetual air of condescending annoyance. Tonight, however, I feel something more emanating from the woman. While I've seen what she's capable of and have even sought out her skills before, for the first time, I can sense the power emanating from her. There's nothing preternatural about it either. Rather, it's a subconscious perception of her countenance. Either I'm more aware of her body language, or the threat she poses is enhanced by the circumstances, but there's something about how Ophelia carries herself tonight that gives me pause. "What did she do to you, Ed?" she asks, careful compassion in her words. "Are you all right?" "She didn't do anything," Gulliver admits. "I did this to myself." Ophelia gives me one final suspicious glare before turning her full attention to Gulliver. Without moving, I feel as if I've been pushed back by a full yard, away from them and away from their concerns. "Does it hurt?" she fusses, gently cupping the wounded limb into her tiny hands. Deft fingers run the sides of Gulliver's bandage, barely touching the gauze, as if too much pressure could break the bones further. "They gave me pills for the pain." Their conversation continues, as mundane as a couple discussing an accident could be. Meanwhile, I watch and listen as if inside a fishbowl. "Take my side of the bed so you don't accidentally lie on it. Do you need me to pick up more drugs tomorrow? Do you have insurance in case you can't work for a while?" Every concern more boring than the last, but each important and practical. It's almost enough to make me forget the circumstances that brought us here, in a hospital ER at 2 a.m. At the same time, I feel like I'm releasing a wounded seal back into shark-infested waters. "Gulliver, I interrupt them. You can't just go with her. I couldn't get through to him then, and I'm not sure why I think I can now, but I have to at least try. Except where I was having this conversation with a friend a minute ago, I now have to contend with the very person I want to keep him from. Ophelia gives her giant, drugged-out and exhausted boyfriend a gentle look. Even I can read the secret language between them and hear the unspoken assurance that she'll take care of this. Clad in crimson, Ophelia pushes herself high on her toes. She's like a tree frog, warning of its toxicity with bright colors, or a bird making itself look bigger to face down a threat. You're just like any other Dufour, aren't you? The question is rhetorical, and before I can protest, she raises a finger to silence me. I'm not done. Here's the thing, Miriam. I'm relieved Eddie didn't hit you. I don't know what he broke his hand on, and I don't care, but judging by the damage, I bet he left a mark. I can tell by that empty expression on your face that you have no idea what happened. You're scared and confused and looking for someone to blame. Well, I have all the answers you seek, Miriam. Go home, go to your washroom, take a long, hard look in the mirror, and remember what I told you about reopening your coffee shop. Satisfied by my stunned silence, Ophelia turns on her heels and walks back to Gulliver. She takes his unbroken arm in her hands and starts to lead him out of the hospital. I watch, letting them get so close to the exit that the automatic doors slide open. Ophelia, I call out, surprised at my own voice. She turns to look back at me. She, too, did not expect that I would speak up. Put him under your spell again, and there'll be hell to pay. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I'm not letting you get away with manipulating my friend again. She frowns for a second time, then makes a show of turning around, intent on ignoring my threat. Don't say I didn't warn you, I say, echoing her words. And you just let her walk out? Annabelle is sitting at the counter of the Aquilo, her narrow fingers tracing a large dent in the wood. She came in with the dawn's first teasing lights, knocking on the glass just as the clouds were being tickled by that hint of orange promising a sunny day. Her bag rang with its contents, either competing or harmonizing with the door chimes, the familiar knocking of shakers, glasses, and bottles, singing the song of her trade. My exhaustion stood in direct contrast to her buoyant mood, prompting me to recount the prior evening's events. Speaking it all out loud made it seem like winter had found its way inside, setting a shiver to my spine. What was I supposed to do? I asked while pulling chairs down from tables. Get in a fight in the ER? I like to think that, for once, I'm being a little more strategic. Besides, I think I can take Ophelia, but if Gulliver comes to her defense, or if she's got any other trick up her sleeve to control him, no, this is one I gotta figure out first and execute second. Annabelle's stool swivels, the subtle sound of metal on metal reminding me I should oil the old thing soon. She adjusts her position to better look at me working, while still being able to touch the damaged counter. The way she marvels at the dent and crack makes me uneasy, like standing at the edge of a canyon with the tip of my toes hanging over the void. It reminds me how we're not violent people, the Dufours. My parents are the template for mild-mannered, and my brother only sculpts his physique for aesthetic reasons, not performance. We don't scrape and we don't fight. The few times any of us have, it never resulted in anything good. If Gulliver hadn't found it in him to divert his blow, he'd probably have split my skull wide open. Hard to imagine that's the result Ophelia really wanted. I wish I could prove she's the one who stole my spoon, though. It's hard to go to the police accusing her of mind control, but a burglary? Eric said some of these spoons are probably worth a little money, if only for their age. so that's motive, right? The best I get is a non-committal shake of Annabelle's head as a reply. What you guys need is a witch police. The last chair hits the floor a little loud, the polished wood on the back slipping in my hands as I lowered it. Sweat I never noticed had built up in my palms as we were having the conversation, the physical manifestation of a fear badly suppressed. A witch police. She says it as a joke, some nonsense out of a children's story where witches and wizards are abundant. Meanwhile, I know of only 2 such people. If you don't count the dead, that is. Myself and Ophelia. Looking around the dining room, however, I am reminded that there is such a thing as witch police in Aquilo. And the last time I asked for their help, they nearly leveled the building in their attempt. Guns, I remember. They brought guns to my cafe. And although they profess that their methods of dealing with the occult are far less medieval now, they are not the people I want involved in this feud. Fine, she says, pulling out her mixers and glasses. Can't stop her from using Gulliver like a puppet. No cops we can call. So what's the plan then? I walk around the counter to the cash, going through the motions of getting the day started at the Aquilo. It's a good thing so much of this is committed to muscle memory. From opening the register to stocking the display, it's all stuff I've done so many times that even when fully exhausted, I know the choreography by heart. Some might even argue that going about it with next to no sleep is standard operating procedure. Nothing? Annabelle insists, lining up her equipment, ready to prepare one of her bespoke mimosas at a moment's notice. Well, lucky for you, I have an idea. A shudder that is half theatrics and half sincere rattles my whole body. I'm about to urge her to spill the beans. After all, Annabelle is no idiot. As long as I've got nothing better to offer yet, I might as well hear her out. The day, on the other hand, has other trials in store for me. No sooner do I think of asking for Annabelle's idea that the chimes of the Aquilo sing the arrival of fresh customers. Or rather, I wish they were customers. Instead, my dining room is darkened by the vile presence of Chef Frederic Gagnon. His arrival smells of trauma and unresolved anger. I'm not exaggerating when I claim he darkens my cafe. Flanked by his 2 acolytes, Bertrand and Stefan, he comes with a veritable cornucopia of electronic and filming equipment. The 2 boys drag in tripods and umbrellas, screens, and camera boxes. The portable studio is piled up on the tables nearest the window, blocking out the morning sun in the process. Like some supervillain out of a comic book, Gagnon, dressed in black, pulls at the tip of his gloves to remove them. He wears a black beret and a convivial smile, each more ill-suited to him than the other. Miriam, he greets me with uncharacteristic warmth. I'm so glad you accepted my offer. Now, I know your worries, but don't fret. Our past differences mean nothing when set against the viewership we can get out of this episode. He leans against the counter, never even glancing back to his lackeys as they toil behind him. His left arm waves through the Aquilo as if he were unveiling a secret vista for me to behold. Picture it, he says. The wayward student and her old mentor, reunited and brought together by the power of fine cuisine. This isn't just a restaurant review, it's a redemption arc, a story of sins forgiven and fences mended. We'll figure out a little clickbait title, get a nice thumbnail image. It'll be one of my best episodes, I'm sure. I've got to give it to him. While I may not have always agreed with his handling of ingredients in the kitchen, Gagnon certainly knows how to mix words to cook up an image. And while I may not have spent the last 2 years kneading my eloquence in quite the same manner, I do have my own way with words. No. What do you mean, no? Gagnon seems as surprised as he is offended. It's a look I've seen on him time and again. While it used to fill me with dread at the time, for what student wants to run afoul of her teacher, today it warms me with nostalgic bliss. Offending Chef Gagnon is like my happy place, somewhere to hide from my other, more pressing worries. I never agreed to this, I explain. I'm not saying I won't, but I never gave you a proper answer. The old Chef Gagnon would have exploded at this point. Once the fuse set, there was no way to disarm his temper. Nothing said after the initial refusal would have been enough to quell his rage. But this is the new Frederick Gagnon, and while there's a brief flash behind his eyes, the old fire yearning to catch a blaze, he instead settles back into his smile. Miriam, please. We both know this is exactly what you've always wanted. My approval aside, having your cooking lauded and acclaimed in front of an audience of Bertrand? 2.7 million as of this morning, Chef. Bert is quick to answer as he looks through a camera case half his size. 2.7 million subscribers, Miriam, Gagnon continues, leaning on the counter and pushing his face only inches from mine. You're a creature of pride, Miriam, and I can get some generous sponsors for an episode like this. This is a win-win situation. Not to mention, we can then part ways with that much of a better opinion of each other. Call it a therapeutic benefit. He raises an open hand, putting a stop to Stefan and Bertrand's work, leaving the Aquilo in absolute silence, the weight of which presses on me for an answer. You can say no, Miss Dufour, he insists, but that is only as concession to your stubbornness, a concession you know you'll regret. Betraying my nerves, I look around the dining room. 8 eyes look at me, anticipating my answer. Annabelle, the one whose counsel I most desire at the time, seems ready to support whatever side I fall on. Her expression is a little tense, but also excited, the prospect of gravitating around this sort of production clearly appealing to her. Stefan, on the other hand, offers as much of an opinion as the chair he's leaning on. Yet, aside from Gagnon and I, he's the one with the most at stake. What happens to his contract if I refuse to participate? A day, I decide. Give me until the end of the day to get back to you. That way, when you do show up tomorrow morning, I'll be at my very best. Gagnon smiles broadly, then gives a hearty slap to the counter, inches from where Gulliver broke his hand. Granted, and I will be here tomorrow morning because I know you'll accept. Gentlemen, pack it up. They bought coffee and pastries before leaving, and just as suddenly as they invaded the Aquilo Cafe, they were gone. Off to shoot some B-roll footage, or whatever. On their way out, they crossed paths with some of my regulars trickling in. The day was starting, and I had little time to stagger back from the surprise. So, Annabelle asks, interrupting my current battle with the coffee machine. Gonna do it? Not sure yet. I'm far more worried about Gulliver for now. Which brings me back to my plan. It's a stupid plan. Extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures, and one could argue that my situation qualifies, but I can still see the idiocy for what it is. For lack of better ideas, Annabelle's plan is the best thing we have. Then again, if you're making whipped cream and all you have is skimmed milk, it may be your best substitute, but you're still not getting whipped cream. Not to mention, the word plan is a broad exaggeration. This is the butter pasta of plans. Barely a meal and too simple in its preparation to be called a recipe. However, where a nice bowl of butter pasta can be of comfort on a cold night, this plan feels like the cold water you strain after the noodles are done cooking. Not to mention, it is unarguably illegal. The moon shines high in the night sky, not quite full, but almost as bright. Most clouds have moved to the edge of the horizon or beyond the tree line, clearing the stage. It's a blessing of this late hour that the streets are completely empty. Apart from that one flickering bulb on the street lamp near the corner of Rue Principale and Claremont, Aquilo could be a painting. Approaching Pearls of Wisdom, Ophelia's knitwear and accessory shop, I'm struck again by the foolishness of our endeavor.
"We can't do this,"
I whisper.
"Look,"
Annabelle argues.
"it's just one quick heist to get the evidence we need."
This isn't a heist. It's a straight-up burglary. We stop in the shadows next to Ophelia's home, hidden in the place that light forgets between two lampposts.
"It's not burglary. We're here to get your spoon back. How confident are you that Ophelia's the one who took it?"
I hesitate. Fidgeting with the zipper on my coat, I go through my short list of evidence. What was it that Detective Wilson taught me? Motive, opportunity, and means. It's become obvious that, while not completely clear why, Ophelia has a powerful need to undermine me. And that motivation has taken on a whole new dimension since I've reopened the Aquilo. Whatever she's got against the cafe, it has calcified into something bitter and dangerous. The means are also both nebulous yet difficult to debate. This woman has managed to put a spell on the entire village with her scarves. I know just how capable of a witch she is, and though it pains me to admit it, she's more knowledgeable than I am on the matter. Her means go beyond what the average person can access. Not to mention, I found one of her damnable scarves at the scene of the crime. The opportunity is far clearer. Someone broke into my cafe. They tossed my register to the ground and went through my things. While I can't put my finger on the specifics of how she did it, it's obvious Ophelia had a hand in the burglary. In essence, we're simply returning the favor. Or rather, I should be the one returning the favor. You stay here, I instruct, as a lookout.
"The hell I am. This is my heist."
I sigh, raising my hand in front of her as if I were trying to appease a wild animal. Again, this isn't a heist. Whatever it is, though, it'll be easier if I go alone, and that way, if anything goes wrong, you won't get in trouble. Gulliver's truck isn't parked on the street. With any luck, that means he's out of town for the night. That doesn't mean he won't be coming back, though. Annabelle frowns and kicks a ball of iced snow in frustration. She digs through her pockets to retrieve her phone, unlocking it for a second, as if she were checking for a message.
"All right,"
she relents, looking me in the eye with a stern expression.
"I see anything that needs your attention, I'll text you. Don't bother looking at it. Your phone vibrates, you get out. It's that simple. Got it?"
Got it, I nod. I must have looked back at her 6 times as I made my way to the back of the store. By the time I'm confronted by the next hurdle, I'm reminded that I don't know how to pick locks. Had this burglary been better thought out, this would have been accounted for. Maybe I could have brought Brioche with me. The raccoon knows how to pick a lock and is easily motivated by food. It's almost a relief, however. After all, if I can't gain access to Ophelia's home, this heist is dead in the water. Then I can go home and get some sleep. Or, more likely, stare at my bedroom ceiling, wondering anew whether or not Ophelia has my spoon, and what she could possibly want with the utensil. I wrap my fingers around the cold door handle, barely visible so far from the streetlights. I press the thumb latch, hoping that the resistance I feel is the lock kicking in. Unfortunately, in small-town fashion, or because of neglect on Ophelia's part, the door remains unlocked. It dawns on me, as I take my first step inside, that I've never bothered to visit Pearls of Wisdom before. While Ophelia has come to spy on me and take up space in my establishment, I've never darkened her doorstep. I don't knit and I don't crochet, so I have little business coming here. My eyes struggle to adjust to the dim light. Every step is taken with care, probing in front of me to avoid any obstacles. With some effort, I can see a row of tables, arranged like a small classroom. The walls are covered with shelves, most of which have handwritten name tags attached. Carefully folded bundles of yarn, both in skeins and knitted into partially completed projects, rest there, needles sticking out of most. Stacks of boxes, some of which yawn open, their flaps unfurled like brown petals of square flowers, are full of more boxes, or brimming with bags of plastic containing a mad variety of yarn. Every time I walk, my ears are assaulted by a cacophony of noises. Most are real, like the subtle cracking of pebbles and salt under my boots. Others are imagined, like the scurrying footsteps in the shadows or the shallow breathing of unseen strangers. When I stop, however, I am once again enveloped with complete silence. Compared to my neat and obsessively organized kitchen, this classroom warehouse hybrid is a shrine to chaos. It's tempting to give up, if only because there's no way of knowing where Ophelia might have hidden the spoon. But by now, curiosity has taken hold. I cross the back room to a narrow door with a square window. Peering in, I can see some of the street lamps, blurred and diminished through layers of glass. The front room is closer to what I would expect a knitting shop to look like. Neat collections of yarn line the walls, organized by texture, color, thickness, and brand. Racks of accessories, including needles of every size and material, fill the middle of the room. A rack of books, instructions on various knitting techniques and patterns cover the back near the register. The front, closest to the window, has an arrangement of various knitwear, featuring those damn scarves everyone's wearing these days. For comfort, I reach for my own scarf, glad to feel the fleece under my fingers. But just as things should be silent, I hear it again. Those furtive footsteps. They sound like the paws of a particularly fluffy cat or the running of a small child wearing yarn slippers. Frozen, I take a full minute to look around, ears sharpened to the sound, wary that my imagination might be playing tricks on me again. My tenuous grasp on my courage reaffirmed, I make my way to the register. There's a tall wooden stool there, covered in a knit cushion that looks rather comfortable, I must admit. It's too much to ask that the register be unlocked, though in the end it doesn't matter. I doubt a wooden spoon of that size would have fit in there, especially Philomen's, which is unusually large. Besides, the sound of a register drawer popping open would wake anyone up. The shelves behind the counter are no more useful, cluttered instead with a dozen half-finished projects. More scarves by the look of it, but also a pair of mittens only a thumb away from completion. Then there are the crocheted stuffed animals. 5 of them, made of bright-colored yarn and missing only their eyes to be finished. I sit on the ball of my feet, listening again for the footsteps. They sound more numerous now. Where there was but one set before, there now seems to be a half dozen, though they still stop the moment I freeze. The bottom shelf is even less inspired. A pair of boots with fluffy pom-poms attached, some plush slippers that look like something grandmother would wear, and a stack of reusable grocery bags. I'm about to give up, pulling myself back to my feet, when I notice something odd. There are 4 crochet animals. 2 cats, one blue and one white, a pink bear, and a turquoise elephant. I could have sworn there was also a yellow canary there when I last looked. There are no more footsteps. The only sound I hear is that of my own ragged breathing. Sweat trickles down the back of my neck, the warmth of my coat and the pumping of my heart pulling the moisture from my overheating body. And with every breath, a ticking. I can barely hear it at first, lost in confusion as I am. As I gain back some measure of control, I can hear it more clearly. Tick, tick. I recognize the sound of metal on wood, like a customer tapping their spoon on my counter back at the Aquilo, though this is much more subtle. Legs trembling, I pull myself higher, raising my body so my head is level with the countertop. There, waiting for me, tapping a knitting needle on the wooden surface like an impatient teacher, I see the canary. Had I not witnessed worse things before, I would have thought I'd gone mad. Still, I react like anyone would seeing an animated stuffed animal. With a barely suppressed squeal, I swipe the canary away, sending it plopping to the ground after bouncing off the book rack. Dealing with living yarn was not part of the plan, and I'm about to make good my escape, but there's the sound again. Tick, tick, tick. Except this time, it isn't just one spoon tapping on the counter, but dozens of them. Everywhere, all over the tiled floor, I hear the sound of sharp, pointy knitting needles. Tick, tick, tick. Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubeau and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.